Howdy y'all, Christi here with Little Salty Homesteader. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I am joining you from the middle of my tomato jungle to talk to you guys about finding your why in terms of why you garden. Finding your why. Why is that even important? So in the midst of the garden season, when things are incredibly jungly, the sun is incredibly hot, the bugs are incredibly bitey, it gets really hard to stay motivated to get out here and do the work that a thriving garden requires. So understanding why you garden in the first place is really important so that you can, sort of keep that motivation going whenever gardening gets really rough. So I wanted to take a minute to talk about why I garden, what my inspiration is. Before I get into that explanation, I may start sobbing in the middle of this video. If so, I do apologize. Part of my why passed away last week, so I'm still kind of processing all of that and struggling quite a bit. But I did want to honor her memory and also my grandfather's memory. And I don't even know if this is gonna get published. I'm not doing this for the views. I'm doing this to remind myself that I still need to get out here and be with the plants. So I grew up gardening every summer. I don't remember us really having fall and winter gardens outside of maybe collard greens. That's really all I can remember us growing during cold temperatures. But during the summer, we had a pretty big garden that it was at our house, but my grandparents kind of lived across the field and they would come help us tend it, help us, get it prepped for the next growing season and all of that stuff. So when I was a kid, I would help spread out the horse manure and plant the seeds and transplant tomato starts and harvest the tomatoes and water the garden and all of those different things that were required to keep that garden thriving. Now that was not an organic garden, it was just a conventional garden, so we used Miracle Grow and Seven Dust and all of those things that I try not to use in this space. But we had a plentiful harvest each and every single summer, and I would then help my grandma process all of those things and turn them into either canned salsa, canned stewed tomatoes, frozen okra and squash for frying, pickled jalapenos, pickles, so many different things. And then those things would feed us for the next year until the next garden started rolling in with new foods and such. I'm sorry, there's lots of flying bugs buzzing around. And as I got into adulthood, I never really grew a garden. I had attempted a few small ones over the years, a couple of tomatoes and maybe like some dill or something, just something very small that I could grow on an apartment patio. And in 2020, when COVID happened, I went to the grocery store and I was really angry about the lack of availability of the most simple basic items, like even something like tomatoes. It was so hard to find good quality tomatoes in the grocery store, and to put it mildly, it really ticked me off. So I got home and I told my husband Jake, who is supportive of all my wild and crazy, I'm gonna grow a garden because the grocery store doesn't have what I'm looking for and I'm really sick of it. So I'm just gonna plant some tomatoes and some peppers and see what happens. And it went from there. And that garden very quickly grew. I very quickly added flowers and more vegetables and more tomatoes and more flowers and more herbs and all kinds of things until we basically took over my in-laws' backyard with the garden that I was growing. Now they weren't upset by that because I did grow them pretty things and I did share the food. So it wasn't, a totally one-sided thing there. They're actually still growing stuff in the garden that I left behind whenever we moved. And then we moved here, and we moved here in August of 2021, August 2nd. On August 8th of 2021, my dear papa, who I grew up gardening with, passed away. And it was very difficult. And he was a very, very good man. A lot of people will tell you that he was the best man that they ever knew. So anyway, He was a huge inspiration for me, and I went down to see him. That was a wild week. I went down to see him on July 28th, and I stayed until July 31st. I drove back on July 31st. That was my birthday. Got the keys to this house and actually started moving in on August 1st. We were completely moved in August 2nd, and then August 4th I went back down with my kids, and so that they could basically say their goodbyes. While I was down there on that trip, he told me, he said, you need to pick all them tomatoes. They're gonna go bad. Go pick all them tomatoes. So I said, okay, Papa, I'll pick the tomatoes. And so he had cherry tomatoes growing, and I said, all right, I'm gonna pick them, but I'm taking some home with me. And he said, okay. And he said, get you some peppers too. And there was so many. My cousin had a garden kind of next door, and so I went over to my cousin's garden and I picked some of the peppers and stuff, but I picked the jalapeno. No, my papa had cow horns and Mexi bells. So I picked peppers, I picked those. I picked all the red ones and some of the green ones, but mostly red. And I said, all right, I'm gonna take these home too. They're mine now. I said, you made me pick them, I'm gonna eat them. And he said, okay. And we kind of joked about it and how I was stealing all his food. And so I brought all that back to Texas, and I saved the seeds from each of those plants, the cherry tomatoes, the cow horn peppers, and the Mexi bell peppers. I have grown the cow horn and the Mexi bell off and on in gardens ever since that point, but I have grown his cherry tomato seeds every single year ever since. That's this plant right here. Not this one that's crazy, but right next to it. It's almost crazy. And it has been a high producing cherry tomato plant, and I don't know if it's, you know, him helping me have a prolific garden or if it's just the nature of that tomato. I'm pretty sure it was just, you know, like a large cherry hybrid variety from Home Depot or something that he just picked up and put in his garden. But that's what's growing right here, and it has larger cherry tomatoes. And every time that I would start hot pepper seeds, I would think about my nanny, because my grandma, my nanny, because every time we'd be out harvesting the garden, she would go grab a cayenne pepper and she would snack on it like it was nothing, while we'd be picking everything else. I mean, we would be sweating buckets picking zucchini and tomatoes and cucumbers and stuff, and she would just be chomping down on cayennes, and she'd be like, well, they ain't hot. The rest of us, of course, were scorching if we even sampled a little bit of it, but she would say, if they ain't hot, they ain't hot. So every time I start hot peppers, I think about her saying they ain't hot. And I have cayennes growing here in this garden. They weren't seeds of hers, but I grow them anyway for crushed red pepper and stuff. But every time I start those seeds, I think about her saying that, and I just giggle because, yes, ma'am, Nanny, they're very hot. So anyway, back to the whole point of this video. I've held it together so far, so I'm kind of proud of myself. Finding your why in the garden. So originally my why was because I couldn't get it at the grocery store, and it made me angry. Now I understand that, you know, a tomato takes several months from start to finish before you're getting tomatoes, but I was willing to put in the work because I was that angry with not having it available at the store. Over time, the why transitioned from because I can't get it at the store into mental health reasons, because being out here with my hands in the soil sort of helped me release some anxiety and different negative feelings that I was holding for whatever reason, you know, money stress, or just stress and work stress, stress as a mom, stress as a wife, anxiety over anything and everything, feelings that, you know, most people kind of deal with as they grow into age, of not feeling worthy of certain things and all of that. So as the grocery store reason kind of morphed into the mental health reason, it also morphed into honoring my grandparents' legacy. Because there were a lot of times when I was younger that I tried to run away from how I grew up, thinking that it wasn't good enough, or whatever dumb, stupid excuse that I had. But as I got older, I found myself going back to those roots, going back to the traditions that my nanny and papa taught me, and my dad and my mom, of course. I don't want to leave them out of this, because I want to honor them too. But they're still here, so I could just call them on the phone. But you know, it morphed from the grocery store into the mental health, and while it still is a big part of mental health, it is also honoring the skills that nanny and papa taught me. You know, getting out here, putting my hands in the soil, tending a plant from start to finish, so that I can feed my family with either fresh vegetables or some sort of home processed vegetables, and not those mushy canned things you get at the grocery store. And then, you know, teaching my kids about working hard and the rewards of working hard, because gardening is hard work. Out here, teaching them to tend for these plants, but then also getting to eat the rewards. Like, I have a couple of ripe tomatoes out here that the kids are going to get to sample later today. Lily probably won't like them, but that's okay. So when you are dealing with your own garden struggles, think about why you started gardening in the first place. It could be anything as silly as I just wanted something pretty to look at, to the same reasons that I started gardening. You know, I'm at the grocery store. It helps my mental health. I'm honoring my grandparents, or your parents, or your aunts and uncles, or your best friend, whoever it might be. Just remember that why whenever you're out here putting in that sweat equity to harvest your tomatoes, and just kind of draw upon that inspiration as these temperatures get warmer, because they will. It's going to be 100 on Wednesday, so fun times. As the temperatures get warmer, the rain dries up, the bugs are buzzing as I say this. The bugs start really buzzing in. You have pest pressure, you have disease pressure, you have sweat, you have no rain, all of those things that make gardening so much trickier. Just remember your why. Find your why before it reaches that point, and remember it while you're in the throes of that point, because I promise you it's a whole lot easier to get out here and tend to these things if you remember why you came out here in the first place. At the end of this, I'm going to put up a few pictures of my grandparents, because they were my favorite people. Obviously my kids and my husband are my favorite people now, but you know, for many years they were my favorite people. And if you still have your grandparents around, please give them a hug for me. But that's all I have for you guys today. Until next time, go find a way to get those garden manicures. Bye.